a correction over here. How long would these people, how many times would these people be re-elected to the Congress if the Internal Revenue collection was done right out of their office back home? I can assure you they wouldn't be re-elected if the IRS was operating the way they do today. They'd have to be pretty nice guys, wouldn't they? The founders had a lot of good common sense. So the grand jury, they say, well, that's enough right there. We don't need anything more. We can call back the U.S. Attorney and say, Mr. U.S. Attorney, we are not going to indict Mr. A because this law you've got down here, we're going to say your law is of no effect until you people down here comply with the Constitution. We want you to come under that Constitution where you belong. We want you to get the IRS out of the executive branch of government and back over here into the legislative branch of government as per Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. Now, they may want to go a little farther. Now, there's a lot of problems here with the IRS code. They say, well, the Fifth Amendment says that you have to have they got to give you due process. The Fifth Amendment says that you can, you have the right to get proper, I can't think of the proper term right at the moment, but you have the right to be compensated. The Fifth Amendment was put there by we the people to protect us from government. These people, they say, well, the Fourth Amendment, they say the IRS manual says that every IRS audit is an illegal search and seizure under the Fourth Amendment. They say this lower law has to be trash canned because it is in violation of the Constitution. And they can go a little farther. They say, well, let's take a look at the higher laws up here. How about the laws of grammar? Well, you already know that we have a violation there because the IRS code says we have a voluntary tax system, right? And they're trying to prosecute. They want to send Mr. A to jail for not volunteering. So they say, well, we've got a problem there. Well, then the laws of common sense. Common sense tells us that if you take too much away from Mr. A and the other productive people in this country, if you take too much of their production away from them, what happens? They quit producing. Common sense tells you that, doesn't it? Now, if the IRS code was in compliance with the Constitution, if the IRS code was in compliance with the laws of grammar, if for no other reason than the fact that their common sense tells them that it is inhibiting, it is restricting productivity in this country, they can refuse to indict Mr. A for no other reason. How about God's law? God says you return to him 10% of your production and he'll take care of the whole mess. He'll take care of all of it. And the founders, they had a war of independence when King George took 14%. And the grand jury says, this government down here has violated our trust. They're taxing our kids and our unborn generations to come before they're ever old enough to vote. That's taxation without representation. They say, we are not going to indict Mr. A because we're going to protect Mr. A. We're going to enforce the Constitution. We're going to enforce these higher laws. This lower law is not in compliance with the higher laws. Suppose you have a grand jury that is not functioning properly, a grand jury that is not a check. You see, that grand jury that will refuse to indict Mr. A, that grand jury that refuses to indict Mr. A is being a check against the President of the United States and the administrative branch of government. That grand jury that refuses to indict is a check against a Congress that is made up of vote thieves. That grand jury will be a check against the judiciary. The arrogance of the federal judiciary today must be checked. We must check them. And this is the vote that we use to do it. Now, if your grand jury is down there on the floor, being nothing but a rubber stamp for public servants down here, that grand jury will indict Mr. A, and then he has to go to trial over here in a criminal trial in federal court. And it is happening hundreds of times across this nation. And Mr. A is not going to be able to present the evidence that he needs to defend himself with, because this judge, that judge is going to look out for the interests of government. And the best interests of government say that that jury must not be allowed to hear the truth. They must not be allowed to hear the truth, because if they hear the truth in that courtroom, they are going to rule against the government. Every decision that we have seen come out of the Congress, out of the executive branch, out of the judiciary in the last 50 years, almost without exception, has been in favor of government and against the people of this nation. It has been a downhill slide because we, the people, have not been exercising our power on these grand juries and on the trial jury. Now, here is the beauty of what I have been trying to teach you today. If that grand jury does not function, and if they indict Mr. A, he goes to trial in that courtroom, and if we can reach just one person out of every 20 in this country with this message, I'm not talking about meeting or reaching a majority of the people like a democracy, where we have to try to change the people, the faces in the Congress or in the Senate and in the White House. No. We can do it with just 5% of our fellow Americans, our countrymen, understanding the principles that I am talking about here at this point in time. Because all we need on this jury over here, this pettit jury, is just one informed American. And it's a strange thing about that one informed American. They've got a stronger backbone. They've got a harder head. And not only that, but they have a concern for their country and their countrymen, and they will carry that over into the deliberations in that deliberation room after they take the case and go back to come to their decision. Back in 1980, in February of 1980, we had a trial in Great Falls, Montana. The IRS had managed to get an indictment against a farmer. They had him with 3 felony counts being tried for tax evasion. They had set this man up like a pigeon. He didn't have a chance. They had all of his records. They had gone to great extremes to set up a case that was just absolutely airtight for them. They went through that trial, and the jury took that case about 3 o'clock of an afternoon. They deliberated until late in the evening. I had not been able to attend the trial. I was 220 or 30 miles away, and I was staying very close to my telephone, waiting for the news. The IRS, during the trial, during the evidence, had admitted that they had tried to make this farmer commit suicide. I had spent about 2 hours with this man in the restaurant of the Holiday Inn in Great Falls, Montana one day, explaining to him why he dared not to commit suicide. If it hadn't been for his friends and his family, his neighbors just literally hanging on to him, there would not have been a trial. The IRS would have ended up with everything that he had, including his farm. That's what they wanted. And that jury went out, and I didn't hear anything. That jury deliberated late into the evening, and then they came back the next day and all day long. And I stayed close to my phone. I knew I knew we had been running those television across the state of Montana explaining basically what I'm explaining to you today.